For everyone that's been on this webinar before, you already know me, but my name is Alex Fetter. I'm the marketing manager here at EasyMorph, and I'm happy that y'all joined us for the webinar on how to automate or quickly automate data ingestion, validation, and processing, uh, where we'll showcase how you can automate much of the data ingestion processing from beginning to end. Just to mention, this will be recorded and we'll send you the recording at a later time via email. And one other thing, you'll be muted right now, most of you, but at the end, we'll open up to a Q&A where you can ask questions and we can also have an open discussion. So today, we'll briefly go over a quick overview of what we're talking about, and then we'll go into how you can actually collect and store data from different systems and sources. Then we'll go over how you can validate, process, and monitor that incoming data throughout the entire data ingestion lifecycle. And just like I mentioned before, we'll open up to a Q&A. So if you have any questions, just write them in chat throughout the webinar. So today we have two leaders joining us. We have Dmitry Gudkov, who a lot of you know. He's our founder at EasyMorph. And then we have Matt Fryer, our technology evangelist. Both have over 25 years of experience in the data and analytics industry. And today they will show you how you can apply data ingestion automation to your organization's workflows. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Dmitry.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to share my screen, 1 second. So today we will be talking a lot about data ingestion, and for those of you for whom this term is not familiar, it's basically something that you probably deal with on a daily basis. So we are talking about the process of organizing collaboration between two or more organizations in its most basic form, where you need to send and receive data and files. And today we will be focusing on the ingestion or the incoming data. So where you need to collect data and files from external counterparties, external organizations such as suppliers, partners, resellers, branches, maybe government organizations and whatnot. Organizations always exchange some kind of data with other organizations, and it's frequently just a matter of scale. In some cases, just maybe a few files per month or even annually. But for some organizations, collecting data and files from other or external counterparties, that's part of their business model. And at certain scale, scaling this process becomes rather a business challenge rather than a technical challenge. I'll tell you one example. A few years ago, a US company reached out to us with the request at a demo EasyMorph. So they, what they do, they process HRs and benefits data on behalf of many companies to calculate taxes, payroll contributions, benefits. And the challenge they had is they collected all those files from hundreds of organizations, but since every organization sent this payroll and HR data in different formats, someone as PDF, someone as Excel spreadsheets, someone as CSV files, it was hard to cleanse and unify that data, make it uniform in order to upload it into the internal system for all the calculations. So they employed a team of people who did it manually. So far it worked, but they wanted to scale up their operations. They wanted to onboard many times more organizations. And for them, scaling up this capability, this function was a business challenge because they definitely needed a way to improve the efficiency of this process. So they reached out to us. they liked Isomorph. Isomorph worked and keeps working very well for them. And it's been several years. They are one of our major customers in the US. So that's one example. When you receive data, there are multiple challenges, technical and organizational. So some of them. Well, first of all, that's security. Of course, the data you receive, that may be sensitive. It may contain confidential information, personal data. So the question number one is, of course, ensuring security of this process. Second, incoming data, since it's frequently prepared by people, frequently manually, it's always not static. It always evolves, changes. Today you receive data in one format. Next month you may receive exactly the same type of data extract, but the column name is slightly different, or maybe one extra column is present. So data formats are constantly changing. If you use a hard-coded solution, it's hard to maintain all those constantly changing data formats. But if you process them manually, that doesn't work well too, because it's hard to scale up manual operations. So that's a challenge. Then maybe not as important at small scale, but once you have massive data ingestion, when you receive hundreds and thousands of files, there is always the question of management and governance. How do you handle it? What are the challenges? What are the data quality issues that you run into? How you distribute tasks in your team that handles data ingestion? How long does it take? So all those questions arise, and you need to have answers, and you need to have tools to how to organize work and how to govern the whole data ingestion process. And then finally, as I mentioned, scaling up data ingestion, that is frequently a business critical challenge. And given the limitations of the current ways how people typically do data ingestion, how they typically organize receiving data, those challenges can be quite serious, especially when you try to scale up your operations. So what we can offer and how we propose to organize data ingestion. We see it as a 4-step process, and today through the webinar, we will demonstrate how these steps can be organized using the tools and means provided by Isomorph. The steps include, well, first of all, receiving data. How you can organize receiving data through multiple channels: emails, web forms, file transfers, API calls. There can be multiple channels. Then after you receive data, how do you make sure that it's correct? Maybe people who sent it messed up something, and and the data is not valid. So you have to validate it first, and again, how you can organize it with Isomorph and in a more efficient way. Then processing. Well, after you validated data, then you have to do something with it. Combine, aggregate, unify, upload it into data warehouse, data lake, or some internal system. So that's all covered in the processing part. And throughout the whole process, you have to do monitoring. Did you receive enough, all the files or all the data you're supposed to receive? Was it of good quality? Have you resolved all the data quality issues? And finally, have you processed all the submissions? And if did all the processing go well? So it's all part of the throughout monitoring process. A few words. So why Isomorph? That's because Isomorph, it's a very versatile data automation, data engineering platform that has multiple use cases. that is based on visual workflows that allow organizing data automations in a way that is easy to build and easy to modify, and with many integrations and capabilities already baked into the platform. So let's start with looking at the ways to receive data, and then we will Matt will take over and continue with other parts of the process. So the first and the most important or frequent way how people receive information is, of course, by email. If you work in an organization and you work with data, you know that it's a very, very common situation where you receive some files on a daily basis. And currently, it's mostly a manual work, because, well, you don't use any special tools. You have your Exchange address or Google address, mailbox, and then you see an email arrives from someone. So you have to save those attached files into some folder, and then maybe look inside, cleanse them a bit, shape them, and then process them manually. Usually there is no much automation or any automation at all here. The email channel has its own limitations because, well, for instance, sending large files is not suitable by email, but it works. It does the job in many cases, and that's what most people use on a daily basis. However, this process can be improved, and EasyMorph offers automated email handling, where you can sort, classify, categorize incoming emails, save attachments and zip attachments, rename, move files to specific folders or disk locations, SharePoint folders, and whatnot. And all that can happen in real time, where automations are triggered by incoming emails, and you can even add advanced capabilities such as automated responses or automated validation. So that's all part of the EasyMorph platform. The second channel of receiving files popular in organizations is exposing shared folders in services such as Google Drive or OneDrive, or maybe SFTP folders. Again, existing tools, nothing extra. Supposed to be simple, but in practice it's not that simple. Well, first of all, it's still very much manual operation with little or no automation at all. And while the benefit of it, you can handle pretty big files with it, the downside of it is that it doesn't scale up well, because it quickly becomes very cumbersome to manage security. Who can upload where? You may have hundreds of folders, and there is poor visibility. Who can access what? And managing all that frequently becomes at scale. It becomes a problem. Where EasyMorph can help is that we offer trigger-based automation, where you can automate file transfers. Let's say you expect files to be uploaded to Google Drive or Dropbox, so you can configure workflows that are triggered automatically, and once a file appears, then it's immediately gets maybe checked for malware and then transferred to a specific location where it can be analyzed and processed. So that's another option. So far, we looked at ways to receive the data submitted manually, but also in some scenarios, you may receive data and files through APIs. So you have certain APIs exposed, and then you have machine-to-machine type of data flows and submissions, where external organizations contact your APIs and send data and through those APIs. Frequently, it's done by deploying custom solutions, writing APIs as custom applications in Python or Java or C#. As any software development, it has high cost of deployment, and since everything is hard-coded, any change in data formats, column names, file types, it requires a lot of effort to change it. So EasyMorph offers a similar ability to deploy custom APIs, but in this case, they're powered not by custom code, by visual workflows. So they're much easier to deploy, they're much easier to change and maintain, and to integrate with cloud applications and external applications through cloud platforms. We offer a service called EasyMorph Gateway that provides cloud webhooks to receive and process data in a secure way. Finally, EasyMorph offers a purpose-built solution for processing incoming file submissions. It's called Web Tasks. If you registered for this webinar, you already used Web Tasks, so you can get an idea what it works like from the user perspective. Web Tasks offer a public portal with authentication, with complex web forms, file uploads. It provides strong end-to-end encryption, support for pretty large files, and all the file and for submissions are immediately processed with visual workflows securely on your EasyMorph server. That's a brief overview of all the popular channels for data ingestion. And at this point, I'm passing the microphone to Matt, who will continue with explaining how data can be validated with EasyMorph.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see my screen and we can continue. So that receiving data is just the first step in that process that Dimitri described. And once we've got the data, we always need to validate it. And that can take lots of different sort of phases or problems that we need to consider when it comes to validating data. The first problem is the format of that data and the type of file or whatever data we've been provided. This is typically, as Dimitri described, a case of somebody sending us Excel spreadsheets or CSV files. And most commonly, the first step in dealing with those files and seeing if they're the correct format that we expect is for a human being to open them. It's another manual process. And again, that has its own problems and issues. They either end up copying and pasting the data from those files into a standardized template, or they end up manually modifying those files to make them the kind of right format, to have the right column names, etc., for us to be able to then go on and invalidate in more detail. Some of the problems that doing it that way can have is, obviously, it's labor intensive, and as Dimitri described, scaling up those labor intensive processes is very problematic and costly, and it can be incredibly prohibitive. Just because I double the number of files I process doesn't necessarily mean double the number of people to deal with them. All of the extra complexity can mean that problem can actually be much bigger for us. Some file types are also difficult to deal with. We can have people to send us, scans of order forms, for example, and they are images. And so, yes, they contain all the data we need, but it's not in a usable format for us to use. And so often, again, people end up typing the data from those images and PDFs into other systems. And that's, again, expensive and costly. And because human beings are involved, none of us are perfect, we make mistakes. And so it's really easy, if we're processing a large number of files, there will inevitably be mistakes in those files because human beings make mistakes. So how can EasyMorph help us? Well, not surprising, is we deal with just about any file format that data may come to you in. All of those kind of CSVs, Excel spreadsheets, the common sort of people generated data files, but also more technical files. So if we're using one of those more technical channels of receiving the data, it might be in a more technical format like JSON or XML. EasyMorph doesn't care. We can deal with all of those file formats very easily. And again, we can create different logic or different workflows in EasyMorph to deal with those different formats, whether it's one workflow to deal with Excel spreadsheets and another one to deal with JSON, or different formats of those files, even though they're the same file type. We can process them however we need to deal with that individual format, and we can bring them together in our workflows as well, back into a single set of data to make them usable and to continue down the rest of the process of more validation and using that. For those difficult file formats, those scans of order forms, etc., then we can also integrate our workflows very easily with AI. We live in the age of AI, and so leveraging that technology to do the job of reading those images and turning it into actual data for us is viable, it's usable as today, and it takes away a lot of that human effort involved as well. And ultimately, we should be able to automate that process of validating the format of these files so that human beings aren't having to do all of the work or the majority of the work. We can let EasyMorph take care of that and build steps into our workflows to divert those things that aren't quite right, that don't validate correctly, to people so they can just deal with the problems and not have to validate all of the good data as well. As I said, it's very easy to build this type of logic. We can branch our workflows very easily. We can base that conditionally, and so we can say if it's a certain type of file or it contains a certain value in the data, whatever criteria, it's very easy to branch that logic off, do the extra steps to modify it or check that data, and then bring all that data back together into a single usable form. The next problem is a problem of automation. It's great if we're going to automate this validation, but when we're taking human beings out of the equation, that means building complex solutions. And commonly, businesses are try and do this in order to scale up by building custom solutions. Every business is different. Every need for that data ingestion is different. And so they're always custom solutions, and they're generally coded in a mixture of combining lots of technologies. We combine SQL and Python or command line scripts to move files around. And these heavy code solutions are the norm for trying to solve that process of automating as much of the validation as possible. Automating it in this way comes with challenges in its own right. As Dimitri described, then if I'm going to write these code heavy solutions, well, there's lots of programming skills involved. I have to be able to write that code, and that comes with a set of skills that require IT and developers to get involved in helping to build those solutions. It's time consuming. Dimitri mentioned it. It's a case of not just kind of building a quick solution, but we're writing software, and we need developers to help us with that. So the business users end up spending a lot of time writing requirements to hand over to the developers, and then we have all that process of development and testing to do, which is time consuming and slow to implement. And those processes are slow to adapt. Inevitably, a new customer comes along that wants to send us a new format, or a customer just changes the format of what they're sending to us, or they make a mistake one day, and all of those changes are difficult and slow to update those code heavy solutions to be able to cope with. And so they can often become static. They groan under the pressure, and again we end up bringing human beings back in to try and handle some of those problems. So how does EasyMorph help us to build a solution that doesn't suffer with those problems? Well, We do everything we can in EasyMorph to make every feature possible no code, or at the very least as low minimum code as possible. We want the business users who understand the requirements, who understand the customers and the data that they're going to be sending, to be able to contribute to actually building the solutions, not just telling other developers what they need to do. This makes the whole process just much faster. Visual workflows are so easy to adapt then. We don't have to go through those development cycles to try and modify them. We can simply make very quick updates as we discover new anomalies in the data that we need to verify for in the future, or customers who send us new formats and files. And ultimately, we can see the data as it flows through EasyMorph. Code is a case of, well, I fire some data in at the beginning, it does its job, and it gives me a set of data out at the end. And if that isn't exactly what I expected, or a new problem has occurred and the data no longer seems to be valid at the end of that code, it's a lengthy, difficult process to step back through it to work out where it may have gone wrong, what I might need to do to modify it. Visual workflows in EasyMorph always show us all of the data, not just a sample. Data quality problems and those things cannot hide from us. We can see all of the data, and again, those business users can help to use their expertise, their knowledge to solve those problems. And when there are inevitably sometimes those really complex things we need to do that code does have to be used for, then instead of having to build an entire solution in code, EasyMorph integrates very well with things like Python so that we can use visual workflows to do the vast majority of that checking, and just call Python to do the one problem, the one very complex thing that we need it to do, and pass it the data, get the result back, and do all of the rest of that work in an EasyMorph workflow, just using code when it's really necessary. The next step, having got the data and validated that it's at least in a format that we can use, is to start to look at the quality of that data. And this again tends to fall into the laps of people either manually opening those files and inspecting them and checking them and working their way through checklists to validate them, or sometimes it's often the case of we sort of try and run the data through the data processing and cross our fingers and hope that it works, and if it doesn't, then we know there's a problem and we can then go and investigate those files. And both of these methods are, again, less than ideal for lots of reasons. Data quality can be both technically wrong and it can be kind of business logically wrong. Data quality issues are often sort of those two separate groups. Data technical problems in the data may be to do with data types, or to do with this number cannot have decimal places because a number is still a number if it does, but if we're going to use it downstream write it to a system that can't handle decimal places, that could be a technical issue. We can also get technical issues where data has all sorts of problems that as human beings we can't see. We can have hidden characters that we can't see but that are there in the data and that can break things further down the chain when we try and process it. And those issues are generally for data experts or for technical IT people to investigate and solve. But there's also those business logical problems that we need those people in the business who understand the customer, understand their system, they understand the whole process. They can validate that data. Just because this data looks good technically doesn't mean it fits our business need and our process. And those are two different sets of sort of checking and skill sets involved in that, and they often sit in different teams involved to try and do that. When it is manual, of course, this is again a problem of scale. More people to check more files, it's just a continuing problem at every step in the process. And new problems come along. new data quality things and issues that we haven't seen before could be introduced. And again, that's another thing on the checklist, that if we're manually checking those files, we've got to add to the checklist and check every file for in the future. So how can EasyMorph help? Well, first of all, we in EasyMorph workflows can perform both technical checking and validation of data quality, and also those business logical expectations of that data in one place in EasyMorph in a single workflow. We don't have to trade it off to different teams. And importantly, those technical checks are very easy and simple to implement in our workflows, so they become something that those business experts can also implement. We can add data pipelines, as we call them, validation and checking in our workflows at every individual step as we go. So it isn't just a case of validating that data at the start when we receive it and validating it at the end. We can check it at every step in the process to make sure it continues to be valid as it works its way through. We also have a common way of dealing with data quality is to implement data contracts to define what we expect the data to look like. And we've created the EasyMorph Data Quality Toolkit, which is a series of tools to help build and create very simple data contracts, and to also test our data again at any step in our process against those data contracts, making it simpler for you to bulk test and validate data very simply by adding those steps to your workflows. And again, if things are very complex, well, we can integrate well with AI to help us use that power to do complex validation and checking. It's a very easy and viable thing now to be able to simply write a request for AI to check some complex logic, describe that logic to it, and get it to help us with that validation. So a couple of things just to highlight those things we've said. Data quality pipelines can be built into our workflows at any point, and we could define the individual tests we want to apply to individual columns or to all of the data. And then ultimately it succeeds or errors are found, and we can decide how to choose to react to those problems. We'll look at that in a second. The data quality toolkit I described, as I said, we can build those really simple Excel-based data contracts, or in any other sort of place we want to build them and store them. And then we can build into our workflows one action to call that toolkit, pass it that data contract and the data, and to get back from it a report of all of the errors it may have found, if there are any. And again, we can choose what to do once we know there are data errors in that data set. So data quality, really important for data sort of usability. The next problem in any validation is, what do we do when a problem exists? We found problems in our data and we need to do something about it. Now, however we're dealing with trying to verify data today, it's incredibly easy when we try and automate it, for example, that problems exist, but we don't immediately know that they exist. They're maybe just parked in a different folder somewhere for somebody to go and look at and to manually check and verify. Or they could silently exist problems in our data that work their way downstream, and all of these can cause us big problems. Really common in these processes is that one problem file gets to the top of the queue, and our whole processing of that data stops because the problem file's at the top of the queue, and those automated systems and processes don't know how to deal with it, and so they just stop working, and all of the other data flowing through that process grinds to a halt until we go and solve that one file. As I said, problems can validate, sort of progress through silently, and often we won't know about those problems until business users looking at the data realize there's something wrong and report it to us, or worse still, customers complain because they sent us some data for an order and we've not accepted that order or sent the order through to them. it's really easy for these kind of data quality problems to end up in reports, business dashboards, and systems, and we can end up making critical business decisions on the back of those. And any delay in discovering those problems is obviously less than ideal. It can really affect the business, it can affect our customers, and therefore it can affect our revenue that we make and our reputation. EasyMorph can help us again by building that logic into our workflows. We can divert problems to people to investigate and allow all of the good data that passes all of that validation to continue through to the next step in the process. So we only slow down the data that is a problem, and everybody else's data continues to flow through the system at the fastest possible speeds. We'll need to notify people when those things go wrong so that they don't get discovered when somebody bothers to go and check, or when the data ends up in a dashboard and somebody realizes it's incorrect. We need to alert people as soon as possible. And of course, we can do that in EasyMorph, and we'll look at some of the ways we can do that in a second. And ideally, if it's a simple data quality problem, we shouldn't have to divert that to a person. We should just be able to fix it. Those technical problems, like a date being displayed as text instead of numeric date, which is what our system needs, well, we can fix those by adding steps to those workflows to manually correct those common errors that we see. Things like making all of our product codes uppercase, anything like that, where there's a simple logical solution to solve the problem that today we might be relying on a person opening that file and manually correcting for us. We can build steps into our workflow to deal with those problems automatically and allow that data to just keep flowing. We mentioned those notification channels. We can notify people in EasyMorph in lots of ways. Of course, we can send emails to them, probably one of the most common. We can also send instant messages by things like Teams or Slack so that people get them instantly and they pop up. Sometimes people's emails aren't popping up on the instantaneously when they're received, and those instant messaging channels can be dealt with much quicker. We can also send push notifications to mobile devices. So if the person that needs to solve this problem is actually on the shop floor in our factory and not sat in front of a computer, let's send him a push notification to his device to let him know. And we can raise issues and problems into support systems or ticketing systems like Jira or Zendesk so that we can start to track them and make sure that our relevant teams are assigned those issues and they can resolve the problems for us. And one really important method of tracking issues, which EasyMorph offers to us, is we have issues sections built into EasyMorph server that allow us to track issues within EasyMorph, and in a very similar way to a support desk, track that people are allocated those issues and that they're going to resolve those issues. Now, data validation and data sort of contracts and data quality is a huge topic. We've skimmed over it. There is so much detail involved in everything that we've just covered. There's lots of resources out there already to look at the tools available in EasyMorph, such as previous webinars that we've done on an entire series of them on data quality, as well as videos about how to implement the data quality toolkit and use that. So go and check out YouTube and our website for lots of other resources on data quality. Having got the data, having checked it and validated it and corrected it if necessary, we can begin the process of making use of that data in our business. And this is a kind of how long is a piece of string topic. What we do with that data can range from simply saving it into a database somewhere to incredibly complex data manipulation, data transformation, data science, data analysis, very complex processes with that data to make use of it once we've got it and we know it's clean and valid. These processes, again, tend to involve lots of different different technologies from SQL, Python, business intelligence tools, doing not just drawing pretty pictures and dashboards and making reports, but also processing and modifying that data to make it really valuable to report on. And this whole data sort of process in a business of using data can be incredibly complex, and that can add additional challenges. Again, scaling up the complexity of how we need to manipulate and use that data isn't just always a technical challenge. It's often a challenge of resource, of human beings. We need extra technical people to implement those technical solutions. The solutions get more and more technical, and we need more people to oversee them, to monitor them, and all of those things mean that it's very much a scale issue again, but that involves more people and therefore cost and difficulty in managing that process. Lots of different technical tools and technologies involved also means lots of different skill sets we need in our business. We need SQL developers, we need Python developers, we need business intelligence analysts and developers. Again, more people, more complexity, more places for things to go wrong. And complex solutions, just like those software development solutions we talked about a minute ago and that Dimitri talked about when it comes to receiving data, those solutions tend to be slow to implement and very slow to adapt to new changes. Businesses are never static. These processes need to change to move with the business as different business needs arise. And really important in these sort of technical and multiple technology systems is that those people who are the business users, who know the business requirements, they know the customers better than anyone, don't understand them. They're hidden. They're technical code and complexity that they ultimately don't understand. And many of them will be making decisions based upon not understanding the exact logic that's being applied. And that can be problematic as well. So how does EasyMorph help? Well, again, how long is a piece of string? But just to highlight some of those things, repeating what we've already said, EasyMorph is a purpose-built platform for data validation, for data transformation, for data automation. And we have more than 180 different actions, many of which have huge numbers of things they can do, which means that almost anything we want to do with data, we can handle inside EasyMorph workflows in one system, in one technology. Visual workflows, again, they're very easy to understand, they're easy to create, and they're easy to adapt when need be. Those business owners and those business people now no longer don't understand the process, but they can see it, they can be involved in creating it and modifying it when need to. We support, as well as all those channels for receiving data that Dimitri described, we also need to often send that data onto other systems, whether it be databases, new files, which we send on to other partners and suppliers and customers. We need to send them into other business systems or even into those business intelligence and reporting tools. And of course, EasyMorph supports all of those channels as well to send data on. Having a single solution, a single platform to handle every step in that process, receiving the data, validating it, checking it, and manipulating it in whatever way we need, means we've got one place, one process, one location to manage that entire end-to-end process. And again, we integrate well with Python. So when we do want to do really advanced things with that data, machine learning, statistical analysis, etc., we can hand that off to Python to something that's comfortable for people like data scientists to do really advanced things with that data, but not just make it a separate technology and problem, but integrate it into our EasyMorph workflows. And again, lastly, AI can help us with all of those really extreme or edge case things that we might want to do with the data to manipulate it. And the last step in that process is to monitor it and to know what's going on at every step in that process. Again, monitoring can be problematic. It's often a case of somebody has to keep going and checking to make sure there isn't a problem building up, and that everything is flowing. Or typically businesses use business intelligence dashboards and reports for monitoring of the data flowing through their systems. These are detached technologies. They're not part and parcel for the same technologies that are processing the data, that are validating it, that are receiving it. Because it's detached, therefore, that's another tool involved in this process, but it's also a case that it's difficult for one person to be involved in all of that process end to end. It's often that will be different monitoring in place for the different steps in that process, and different people can be responsible for those steps to monitor them, to make sure things are following. And so no one person sees the end-to-end process. Automation, whilst great at helping to scale up and to take away the problem of needing vast numbers of people to manually deal with the data, it can hide the problems. Problems can build up, they can silently exist, because the automation is doing its best to process that data. And we therefore might not discover those problems until much later down the line, when, again, as I mentioned earlier, our BI dashboards or whatever start to become askew or not work, and we know therefore there must be a problem. And ultimately, because we don't know normally later, until much later, that a problem exists, we become sort of really reactive to a problem and not proactive to that as soon as it occurs, fixing it as fast as possible and keeping the data moving. And that affects customers and partners. They become upset when the order they sent us doesn't get processed. So how can EasyMorph help us? Well as all of that power of workflows and our ability to automate and to validate and deal with all of the data, EasyMorph has lots of tools to help manage and monitor that process. One of my favorites is EasyMorph Explorer boards, where we can build customized home pages for any step in that process or the entire process. And we can include in those pages metrics to tell us how many files or orders or whatever we're processing exist at every step, and we can update those in real time because they're part of EasyMorph. We know when something failed in a workflow. Those metrics update immediately, not when the BI dashboard updates, and we can act on them quickly. And we can include as well charts and tables of data that contain those failed orders, making them really easy to see that a problem exists and to begin to start to act on them. And it's integrated fully, so it's seamless. It's much easier to implement than BI dashboards or some separate solution. And lastly, we can also have the integrated issue tracker, as I mentioned earlier. Not only is this a way of sort of capturing issues, but it has benefits over other separate issue tracking systems like a support desk or Jira, because again, it's baked into EasyMorph. It's part of EasyMorph, as well as just raising issues and assigning them to people and tracking their progress as they're resolved. We can also attach the problem data to that issue, so it's immediately available to the person investigating and trying to solve it. And we can add workflows, which are quick actions that can help us to resolve the problem, or once the problem is resolved, for the person looking at that issue to instantly reprocess that problem file or problem order and allow it to continue down the rest of the journey. So EasyMorph issues do offer a lot more, again, just because they are baked in and they're part of EasyMorph, and it's all one platform. Again, we've gone through a lot very quickly. There is lots of other resources again on our YouTube channel and on our website, and lots of videos about boards on EasyMorph and other things they can be used for, as well as how you can implement them yourself in your organizations. So that's from me. I'll pass back to Alex.
All right, everyone. Thanks for coming. Just keep your eyes peeled over the next few days. We'll send out an email with a recording of the webinar and some other useful information and content. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and we will see you on the next one.